Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome all of you to the fourth Exun Talks session. Founded in 1992, Exun is the computer science and technology club at Delhi Public School, Puram. We hope that these sessions are enlightening. We have a variety of speakers, and you can check out the full lineup on the Exun website. Our speaker for today is Udit Malik, an alumnus of Exun and a sophomore at Vanderbilt University. He is studying computer science and mathematics. Today, he will be delivering a talk titled A New Economy for a Post Automation World. Without any further delay, I'd like to invite Udit.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Udit, and I'm a computer science major at Vanderbilt University. I don't think I really need to say anything about me except that, but I joined Exun in class 8, and really it's one of the best organizations that I've ever been part of, including the ones I've joined in college. So that's saying something. And I'm just really glad to have this opportunity to talk to all of you today. And a little bit about how this talk is going to go. It's not going to be too long. I basically want to get the general idea across about how the economy might change in the next couple of decades as we see the rise of cryptocurrencies and AI and 3D printing and other useful technologies, and why it's going to change. With that, I'm just going to begin. So these are the things that I'm basically going to cover. I'm going to talk about how technology and labor, which is generally just how people have worked in the economy, the wages they've received, how they're related, and how they're changing today. I'm going to talk about why this is even an issue, because throughout history, we've always managed to find solutions to things. So why this discussion today? I'm going to talk about the paradox of automation in the way it presents itself in the economy. I'm going to talk about the role of AI, obviously, the effects on the CS job market, because that's something that's relevant to pretty much, I believe, most of you who are planning to go into tech as a career, cryptocurrency and how it might play a role, and what are the solutions to the problems that I'm going to talk about. So when I went to the US first, I saw that Donald Trump was a huge issue, right? And what he was trying to say to his voter base was that you don't have jobs because illegal immigrants are taking them away. And I wanted to find out, is there any actual truth to this? And I came to India and I saw that there are similar sentiments here, because a lot of people, when they go to a different state to find a job, a lot of people often accuse them as a whole group of taking our jobs away. And I think this is a very stereotypical thing to do. But it's really not the actual thing, because what we're suffering from is something called technological unemployment. Now, throughout history, humans have always innovated because it's the one thing that we're best at. We've used technology to invent things that make our lives easier, but an issue that has come up with this, that we also lose our jobs with it. Now, this is not in itself a thing that we should worry about, because back in the times of the Industrial Revolution, when the loom was invented or the printing press was invented, so many people lost their jobs, but they simply found a way to create new jobs. So they reskilled themselves and found new jobs in other areas like manufacturing or things like that. And that has always been the way back from the Industrial Revolution to the late 1990s and the late 1980s. But the main thesis that I'm going to talk about today is why this is potentially coming to an end and why this is a problem. So even in India, we can see that youth unemployment is rising rapidly, while adult unemployment rates have remained generally the same. And a big reason behind this is that most of the youth who are unemployed in India are having degrees. And engineering a few decades ago was talked about as the thing which has the most potential in the market. And CS is still thought to be as one of the best growing industries in the whole world, especially in India. So why do we have so much unemployment, especially among the younger generations who are looking for things? Now, the thing with technological unemployment is that there are two different lines of thought amongst economists. One side believes that this is a problem that has to be addressed, but it can be done so by the government interfering in the way things are run. And the other side says that this is a problem that's not going to go away. It's going to keep manifesting itself in different forms, and that the only way to deal with this is to completely reinvent the economy the way that it is today. Now, because humans are smart, they've always made up new jobs, which is called the compensation effect. But in the past few decades, we've seen that these jobs are really worthless in the sense that they create nothing, because a manufacturer creates something of substance that we can actually use. A computer hardware guy creates GPUs and things like that, things that we actually use. But most of the jobs today are really just middleman receptionists, things like that, things which provide services to us, but don't really create anything. And because of these relatively low skilled jobs, the wages are growing extremely low. And this is a problem which has led to a lot of companies and a lot of people struggling to actually even just have their own existence. So technological unemployment was thought to be a myth in the sense that people always came up with new jobs, but the rate at which we're creating jobs when compared with the rate at which we're losing jobs is really just putting us and our economy on a downhill slope today. At the same time, this chart shows the labor share, or the amount of wages, the salaries, as a percentage of the GDP. They have been growing down. And this doesn't make sense because our population has been increasing. People have, our GDP per capita has been increasing. People are slowly getting more educated, working better jobs, slowly raising them out of poverty. But at the same time, as a percentage share of the GDP, the total salaries paid to all the people combined in India, and as a matter of fact, even the world, is going down. And the reason behind this is that the gap that you see from the beginning to the end of the chart, that gap has been taken up by automation and in pretty much all areas of the fields. And that is an issue that we need to deal with. At the same time, because we have automation, obviously it's made our lives easier, it's made us more efficient, which means that we can create more things at a cheaper price today. Yet at the same time, our wages haven't gone up, even though we are much more efficient at doing the things we can do. And that is an inherent contradiction that is presented, because this means that the economy is not sustainable, because we're creating things, yet the gap between the graph between these two lines, where is it going? And that's the question that economists are trying to answer. And the best answer that people have come up with is that it's basically going to the rich, to the politicians, to the businessmen, leaving us with much less than we actually deserve. And the reason behind that is turning out to be automation. Again, this is the charts showing the same thing. Now, it is automation because imagine you're a worker in a factory, in a shoe factory, and you're supposed to produce, say, 3 shoes in 8 hours, a reasonable amount, and you have some old machinery that you do it with. And then there are some technological developments, and production times are cut in half because of that. Now, what in an ideal world, what you would expect is that the demand for shoes is still, 3 shoes. So you can create that in 4 hours thanks to the new machinery, and then, have the rest of the time off or doing something else. Or even if you're working for the full 8 hours, you're getting paid more because your work is still the same, but you're doing it better. So you can reasonably expect a better salary. Yet the reality is that companies are forcing people to create more than is needed. And because of that demand, the demand for these things is artificially grown up, because what happens to these 3 extra shoes in our scenario is that they're stored away. And in fact, this creates, not just in the case of shoes are, a very basic example, but things like food and other things are stored away until demand for them is sufficiently high so that their prices can be driven up. And this means that the worker is not getting paid more. We're creating much more than we really need. People are paying more for the same things. And eventually when the company realizes that, okay, they can make enough shoes with just, half the number of workers that they really needed, they lay off half their workers. And so we're getting the short end of the stick. And in a sense, machinery is not really the problem. It's the company's decision, and it's the way that we think of our economy. Because back in the day, we used to have only 1 day weekends, yet people and unions fought for us to have a 2 day weekend because they felt that machineries were, making life easier for us. And in a way, we're getting ripped off today. In fact, most of Europe is now considering having a 4 day work week, which, when I first heard of it, I thought it was insane. Like, imagine having a Saturday, Sunday, and a Monday off for, your entire life. But that is the way things ought to be. And the sad thing is that most countries are not even considering the fact that machinery can be used to make life easier for us, as opposed to, making things worse for us in terms of the prices we pay and in terms of the wages we get. So while automation does boost economic growth, obviously, it also creates some jobs. It definitely improves living standards. No one's denying that. It's also presenting a lot of serious challenges for our workers and our communities, with so many issues like job displacement, disrupting smaller economies like the rural economy, and it basically needs us to readapt our skills, much like the Industrial Revolution. Yet, this revolution is not like the Industrial Revolution, and I'm going to talk about that. Now, obviously, automation is taking over pretty much everywhere. When I was in the US, self-checkout machines are, pretty close to replacing all store workers. Uh, Even in India, so many things are being automated at a very rapid pace. And these numbers are worrying to me because right now we don't really seem to have a plan to address these, because with the useless jobs we've created, useless in a sense that they don't actually create any value except giving, a service, the service economy. We're running out of ideas, and there's not much going to be left. And we can see this is all happening because of the unemployment charts. People don't know what to do. There aren't enough jobs to do, and all these are an issue. And the fact of the matter is that the people like us, we, hopefully, I assume we're pretty privileged. So even if we get laid off, we have the liberty and we have the ability to reskill ourselves. If I was a CS major and I was in a job and I got laid off, I would probably do an MBA and, find a different job. Most people who are suffering from this, if I'm a CS major, again, CS is a growing field. I'm not going to be the one to laid off, but a worker at Walmart, or say in the future at Reliance Fresh, they're going to get laid off and they're not going to have the money to reskill themselves. And they're already suffering from low wages. So there's really no solution that the government seems to have in most countries about what needs to be done with this. And obviously, we see that the goal of the economy right now is to not help us, which is what it should be about, right? We made automation to make our lives easier, yet somehow, for some reason, it's making things worse for us. And this is the sentiment that I'm trying to explain, that machines aren't the problem. I don't want you to take away from this talk that, okay, we should stop innovating because clearly machines are the problem. Machines are not the problem. As in the shoe example, there's clearly so many ways we can deal with it. We can have shorter work hours. We can have longer weekends. We can have higher wages. We can have so many things. Yet this is a choice that people in our country are inherently making. No one thinks about this because no one knows about it. And this reflects in the way we vote. This reflects in the way our policies are made. And now the AI revolution is here. And we don't realize it because it's happening very slowly, but it's happening right now. And the problem with this is that AI is not just going to replace jobs. The Industrial Revolution, it replaced jobs, right? People still needed clothes. The only difference was that instead of people creating clothes, it was machines creating fabrics. The thing with AI is it can replace not just jobs, but entire industries, entire supply chains. And that is a very threatening thing for us, because that means that there could be entire industries eliminated from which, especially ones which require human labor. And we see this even today. I was watching TV the other day and I saw this ad by White Hat Junior, and I saw that they're marketing coding and CS as a skill that people should have to very young kids, like 5 or 6 year old kids. And this is, it's becoming problematic because CS is also an industry which is getting sort of bloated up. And AI and robotics also, they're not just making labor easier, they're replacing labor altogether. Uh, Obviously, and we see that the most developed nations, the ones which we look towards, when people talk about what India should be like, we often look to the West, the developed West, as great examples of what we should be doing. Yet these countries are the ones suffering from this the most, because South Korea has the highest number of robots per 10,000 people. And that is an astonishingly high number to have, because these number of robots are essentially, and the fact is that robot manufacturing costs are going extremely low. They've been cut down by 65% over the past few years, and they're only going to go low. So even though we might not see this as a problem in India, because most of our economy is based on, agriculture, I think 50% of our workers are employed in agriculture, and only 10% are in high skill, solid private jobs. This is eventually going to be a problem, because even in agricultural practices, with the rise of better machinery, we've seen that a lot of peasants who used to work as daily wage laborers or seasonal laborers in farms, they've lost jobs, and because they're landless, they're suffering even more. Now, the problem is that it's not a zero-sum game. In the past, we always had more jobs being created, but now that is not the case. And what AI can eventually do is, it's not going to threaten my job, because eventually you need companies to create better AIs. So as an industry, you might be happy to hear that the CS job industry is safe. But at the same time, because of so many people doing CS, there's surely going to be what I anticipate to be a bubble burst, in a way, the one which we had in 1999, because so many people, it's so easy to get into CS. A lot of people do boot camps, which take like 2 months, and they are pretty much on level with people who do 4 and 6 year degrees. And these people are basically taking spots away from those who are educated the traditional way by just doing boot camps and paying money. And at the same time, feels like machine learning, they're the hot stuff today. Everyone wants to get into those, but no one realizes the number of people getting into these fields and the actual speed at which they're growing. There is a huge mismatch in that. At the same time, CS is an especially unique field because it changes technologies so often. I'm sure most web developers here might know how often new technologies come up and how often you have to, adapt yourself. React was not a thing 5 to 10 years ago. Flutter by Google, the app development language, was not a thing 5 years ago. Python was not a thing 15 years ago. And this requires CS majors to reskill themselves in an especially stressful manner. And 30% of the CS industry and over 60% of senior software engineers are scared of this fact, and that they might get laid off because simply they're not able to catch up. And that's reflected even in India, which is a growing economy. Most jobs will be for roles in the next few years which don't even exist yet, which means we're creating yet more useless jobs which don't create value simply to fill up the economy. And most people will end up changing their primary field. And that might not be possible for everyone, because obviously, although CS is a generally stable career, there are obviously things that can happen, like the COVID-19 pandemic, which leave a lot of us unemployed. And these pandemics, they also give companies the get-go to actually use automation to replace their workers faster. More companies are now buying robots because it's too much effort and too much money for them to actually invest in office spaces, which allow for things like social distancing and, all that sweet stuff. So the solution to this, which has been proposed, is a universal basic income. Now, this might sound weird, but it's simply a cash payment to the people. And as Indians, we're not very unfamiliar with this. A lot of farmers often get cash payments from the government to do this. And it's actually a great way to boost the economy. Now, why is that? If you're a worker and you're getting paid in wages, most of them are going to things like transport or food or healthcare. But a lot of these things are now being provided by employers. So what that leaves us, especially the people who don't have jobs, is that when they lose their employer, they also lose so many benefits that come with the job. Because most jobs in India, they provide more benefits than one could possibly imagine. And tech companies especially take pride in this. Google is proud of itself for having a workspace that provides free lunches, free fun games, all that smack. So by forcing the government to do these things, investing in education, because education is what we can use to reskill ourselves, investing in AI, because, like I said, AI itself is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. It does make our lives easier. No one wants to do, I would like to believe, physically demanding jobs for extremely low pay. So if we can replace those with AI or technology, and for example, even in Delhi itself, there used to be manual cleaning of sewage pipes and gutters, and now they're slowly being replaced by machines. And this is a great thing for our dignity as humans in itself, because it makes most of the jobs that we don't like to do are the ones that are paid the least. And by investing in AI and tech, we can replace those away. But the only way to ensure that these workers are still going to be able to live and afford a living is by giving them cash payments, which is what universal basic income is all about. And it's not a new or a completely discredited idea, because it's been Bill Gates has talked about it, Mark Zuckerberg has talked about it, Elon Musk has talked about it. At the same time, where if it's meant to be universal, so everyone gets it. So if you're a CS worker and you get laid off, and you do have a strong backup in the sense that you have a good house and you don't worry about basic essential services, you can use that money to take risks. You can use that money to start your own company and better improve the tech that we already have. So all these things, once we start investing in these, can potentially change the way that our world looks. And beyond giving just cash to people, it also has another advantage. It limits the power that companies have over people. And the less that people depend on the company for their pay, the more they can bargain. So the problem of low wages is also dealt with this way. So what happens, much further in the future when companies can pretty much use automation entirely? The way we've grown up, we think that working is a necessary part of life, right? And we think that there's always going to be work. But what happens in the distant future when there are very few jobs, only for specialized things like surgeons? And even surgeons are being replaced by robots, but I anticipate there's always going to be some need for very high skill jobs that people need to create, better robots or things like that. And there's going to be a limited number of these jobs, and not everyone is going to be able to get these jobs. So what happens to the rest of us? By having things like a UBI and shorter working hours, we can actually do what we intend to as humans. Because when you know that you are not going to starve just because you're not working, you can invest time in better things. And you don't have to work because there is no need for work. Even now, there are so many bloated jobs which we don't really need. If we had a UBI today, all these people could just sit at home and we wouldn't notice a thing in the way that the world is run. So we need to center the way we think around humanity instead of just profits, because all these profits have ruined working conditions for us and are leading towards an economic disaster. And a lot of potential, especially because of tech, lies in the artisan economy, because there is an especially new demand for people creating things. Websites like Redbubble and other websites are especially blowing up because they want people designing things. And that leads to an especially interesting job market for graphic designers, because there's just so much design that people would love to see on so many different things. We've seen clothing, but there might be better designs coming out for furniture in the future when these things become easier to obtain with the help of 3D printing and other things like that. So obviously, we need investments in education, training, and social safety, and we need to keep investing in AI and automation. Now, the final thing is, where does Bitcoin play a role in this? We know that it's been deregulated by most nations in the world. China recently banned it. A lot of other countries have banned it. Yet at the same time, people who are diehard fans of Bitcoin still insist that it can change the way the future is going to be. And that is very true because of how decentralized Bitcoin is. It can actually help things like UBI by preventing the government from completely taking over, in a sense, because it's really not a good idea to have the government funding everything, because we know there's a lot of corruption. Imagine if we were taxed at a 20% extra in India to fund UBI. The system would fall apart because there's so much low level and mid level corruption happening, which we see all around. There's so many projects that start off great, but they don't really come to fruition, or they end up costing way more than people had anticipated, or they end up taking 10 to 15 more years than people expected. And that is the reason why Bitcoin might be a good way to think about this. And so that's my general idea. The main takeaway would be that automation in itself is not a problem. However, the way we look at it today, there is a big contradiction between the fact that we are able to produce more, we are able to produce more in a less amount of time, yet at the same time, less people are employed, we're being paid less, and we're really working towards nothing. This isn't a goal-oriented economy. There's no distant silver lining that, okay, once we reach this point, we're going to be able to, you know, uh, end this downward cycle. So, simply put, if we change the way and not just we, our entire society looks at automation, we can really redevelop the goals of our economy. And this seems to be an issue that has gained traction over the past few years, but at the same time, there's really no one relevant talking about it with a sense of urgency, despite all these, damning statistics that I had to share with you today, because all of these are extremely worrying. In the next decade, a lot of things could possibly go wrong, yet not enough people are talking about it. And that was the main reason why I decided to give this talk. So if you guys have any questions, you're free to ask. Okay. So how feasible is UBI in the Indian scenario with extensive corruption, bureaucracy, and a general attitude towards money? Um, yeah. So I talked a little bit about this already, but right. So we're not going to be able to have UBI without investing in a welfare economy first. So I talked about investing in education and investing in healthcare and other things like that. We need those to already be in place before we have a UBI, because people don't really know what to do with their money when they don't really have money. Several studies have shown that people actually gain about 10 to 15 IQ points. I'm not saying IQ is a great measure of intelligence, but people tended to gain 10 to 15 IQ points when they had money as opposed to when they didn't have money. So that meant that people are smarter when we have money, which sounds somewhat counterintuitive, but that's not. But if that is the reality, then we need to invest in education and other things to actually be able to make people utilize UBI the way it's meant to be, especially when automation takes over. That's not really a problem that the average worker in India is thinking of right now, especially because most of us are in agriculture. But with rising unemployment, and a lot of politicians today, I think Rahul Gandhi spoke today about how he predicts that in the next 10 years, we're going to have unprecedented levels of unemployment. And, I think that's just like a political game he's playing. But if that is the reality, then we might be in for some damning times. Do you think the world will become more materialistic in the artisan economy? I'm not sure what you mean by materialistic. Do you mean it in the philosophical sense? But I'm just going to answer that the way I think we try to ask it. I think people are going to focus on themselves much more than they focus on working right now. Most of our lives are revolved around working. People marry because they want to. People marry only after they have a good job because they want to provide a living for their family. People don't. A lot of people don't marry, especially in Indian society, because they really just want to marry, and that's not the way I think humanity should be. At the same time, and when people have money and when people have time, people will really be able to pursue what they really want. I know that if I had all the time in the world, I would pursue my hobbies. I could maybe start an esports career, or I don't know. Not that I don't enjoy CS, but I'm sure most of us would be doing extremely different things in college if we knew that we don't really have money as a factor to worry about. What do you think people doing useless jobs can do, keeping in mind that they don't have many resources? Right. So these people, usually low skilled workers, they are somewhat helpless in the way that the economy is, right? They don't have much say because they're not the ones making decisions for hundreds of employees. So the best thing that we can do for them as responsible citizens, as potentially influential citizens, is try to find ways to influence the government and other organizations to implement these things to make their lives easier. At the same time, reskilling themselves is a great way, and there are many, many nonprofits working today that are aiming to reskill people, and that is why we have CS boot camps, right? Although a lot of people hate on boot camps because these people, almost challenge the way a CS degree is earned by simply matching what a CS graduate has to offer. These are also a great way because people need jobs, which is why CS boot camps have become so popular in the last 10 years, because people really think that this is the area where they have jobs, which is why they're trying to reskill themselves. And reskilling yourself is obviously a great thing, but by ensuring that people have the resources to do so will be much better. Seeing as we don't have Bernie Sanders in Delhi, what do you think is a realistic timeline for automation in India? Um, well, even if we had a Bernie Sanders in Delhi, I'm not quite sure we would have things much different. And India, thankfully, because of the way that we've progressed in the last 70 years, we are in a much better position in some areas than many countries like the US, especially in things like healthcare, because as a society, we've grown up in a way that we love our government services. We hate them. We hate the way how they're not running functionally, but we can't imagine a world without them. Because at the end of the day, my I've always heard relatives say कि government job lag gayi to life set hai, because we look at the government as a safety net, which is what it should be. So as to the realistic timeline for automation, um, so China in the 1990s was in a very similar position to India when I think Deng came in and he liberalized the economy. And India is now liberalizing the economy to the extent that China did in the past. And Bernie Sanders is obviously a democratic socialist. India used to have some socialist tendencies until the 70s, until Indira Gandhi came in, but we already have some strong social measures in place, as opposed to the US. So now that we're liberalizing the economy, it's not a bad thing because we do need some sort of rapid development to happen. So China took 30 years to get to the place where it is today, and that was with a lot of extreme measures like the one child policy they had and extreme authoritarianism. So I would reasonably expect to be India to have this problem by 2050, when most of these problems really start manifesting themselves in the economy. Is there any hope for the labor market in the coming decades? I'm sorry, I'm losing my words now. Well, labor I think the labor market is obviously still going to be there, but labor as we look at it is not going to exist because once 3D printing becomes sufficiently able to do things, we will we will see a lot of things just completely taken over by that. Furniture, even houses. So labor, as we know today, physical labor can mostly be automated away. It is the field with the most potential in terms of percentage of being automated away. So the labor market, as I don't look at it as having any hope because eliminating the labor market doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that we're going to lose jobs, which is what my whole idea was about. But we can expect labor to change the way it is, especially what I mentioned about the artisan economy. People will be willingly doing labor in areas that they enjoy or in areas that in which they can enjoy better profits. Different types of chocolates, maybe different types of coffee, different types of clothes, different specialized artifacts, and things like that. What about what about AI in the service sector other than wholesaler and retailers? There are some examples of jobs that can be automated and useless. Okay, I'm not sure I understand your question, but um, right. So AI, when we're looking at AI, it's not simply just a physical job that it's taking away. We're seeing AI also do a much better job than several humans at doing jobs that require a lot of mental abilities and cognition, especially in fields like therapy and empathy, where AI is doing a much better job at humans at predicting risks of depression, risk of self-harm, things like that. And I do anticipate AI doing a much better job at identifying these. So that's one way that AI can replace jobs, not just in the physical field. At the same time, there's so many jobs like teaching, which are also being automated away. Truck drivers, they're a big industry in the US, they're a big industry in India. And even Uber drivers and all these things, they are going to be automated away by self-driving cars. And all these are tens of millions of jobs that we're talking about potentially going away with the number of Ubers that we have in India. And it's only going up. So we're only going to have more jobs that are going to be automated away. And that is my worry. A writer wants to know your location. I meant solution. Oh, okay, okay. Well, one thing I do want to say is that AI and automation, these are topics that aren't necessarily left wing, and the solution doesn't have to be left wing. You know, Andrew Yang in the US he gained traction because this is a problem that's going to affect everyone, and both sides do need to come together to find a solution to this. Now, I am yet to see a convincing argument from the right wing which presents a solution, and that is if you're assuming that UBI is a left wing solution. At the same time, I think that because this is going to affect everyone, I think people are going. I think the solution is not going to come from politicians, but it's going to come from people who are economists and people who create public policy. So what I anticipate is governments getting together to create a committee, maybe like a national Niti Ayog, or maybe like an international UN or WHO of sorts, to decide what has to be done in these fields. How soon do you think recent technology automation will start taking over creative professions? Creative professions. Well, not very soon, which is why I talk about the potential of the artisan economy. Because when you're looking at creative professions like music and art, what makes these things special to us that people did them. I would be much more impressed if I saw Da Vinci paint the Mona Lisa in front of me than if I put in a command and I saw an AI creating a picture of it. These things have value only because humans create them. They don't have value necessarily on their own, but the human labor which is put into these generates their value. So these are not going to go away, not just in the near future, but I don't see them ever going away, because that is what we do best as humans. We are creative, we are innovative, and that is what we love. And that is why all of us are so fascinated by so many different types of art, not just music, not just art, not just dance, but all these different things. So this doesn't really have to take away. Now, obviously, you can use technology to help your art, because, EDM is a thing now. EDM was not a thing back in the 1960s. In the 80s, you had like some synth music, but you didn't have, it didn't completely take away over the industry. And now you have EDM, you have like robotic voices in songs, but at the end of the day, it's still a human creating them. And even if AI develops to the point where it can create good music, I don't think it's ever going to be as popular as a human creating music, because part of the music experience is our attachment to people as celebrities. And that the same as with movies. We are attracted to celebrities because of their talent, which is why so many people go to see them live, which is why I like to visit and see bands personally rather than just hear their music. You know, how can we stop the bubble burst in the field of CS? Well, the bubble burst, first off, it might not be a bubble burst similar to what we had in the 90s, right? In the 90s, it literally was like a boom, an actual bubble burst, where the industry just collapsed within a couple of weeks and so many companies went down under. We're not going to see that immediately unless there is a huge development. For example, if Neuralink by Elon Musk is able to come out with a working prototype, which they've been working in on secret, and they announce it, that might lead to uh, entire industries and entire companies completely shifting all their work and all their resources into something new, and that might kill off a lot of small companies. But that is the worry I have, because this bubble burst is a slow one, so we're not really that worried about it. We're not seeing it, but so many companies have failed to adapt simply because they don't have the resources. And especially in the field of AI, larger companies have the resources and almost have a monopoly on the way they create softwares, because except the big names, Google, Facebook, smaller companies don't really have the big data needed to actually create better algorithms and better programs to actually help humanity. All these companies are starting from scratch, and that puts them surely much, much far behind all these big tech giants. If we can't convince our population to wear masks, how can we expect them to accept automation and reskill themselves? Um, so I see people not wearing masks in India because it's not because they treat coronavirus as a problem that's not affecting them seriously, right? They think nothing's going to happen, कि mask नहीं पहनूंगा क्या हो जाएगा, and कि corona से लोग नहीं मर रहे. That is the general attitude people have. It's a very indifferent attitude. It's not based in any evidence, but it's still a people attitude have. At the same time, people are also very tired of the way things have been. They just want to go back to normal. So if those are the primary reasons why people are not wearing masks, then automation and reskilling themselves are going to be much more urgent needs. When people can really only afford to think about these things and luxuries until they know that they're going to go back home and have food on the table. When you don't have food on the table, when you don't have jobs, when you're applying and no spot is taking you in, when there are no vacancies, especially in the Bihar election, this was a huge issue, that there are no jobs. It's not that people are not able to get jobs. There are no jobs. So you need to create new jobs. And if the only way for people to find a new job is to reskill themselves, then they'll eventually be forced into doing it, which is not an ideal scenario for anyone, but that is what it will come to. What's the difference between the value created by the Da Vinci painting in front of you and a stock trader multiplying his profits? Both create perceived profits, yet some people only consider one of them to be useless. I don't think anyone treats any of them to be useless. I'm not sure what you're trying to get at, because A stock trader, when he's multiplying his profits, he's working within the system to try and earn more money. So, although that's not a real job, he is creating value in a physical sense. Stocks have value, and you can sell off stocks and make money. So that is real value. And again, it's mostly about demand and supply. You can only sell stocks at a decent price if there's demand for it. He's only able to sell the Mona Lisa because it is at a certain level of skill and people want it. People are not going to want it if I painted a painting today and I tried to make it extremely interesting. I know no one would want to buy it except maybe my mom, right? So these are extremely different things, but at the bottom level, both of them have the same human idea of making things better for ourselves. And I think a stock trader, in your example, would be able to take far more risks to get more profits if he knew that he had, a basic social safety net behind him. At the same time, a Da Vinci painter would be able to create many more innovative paintings if he knew that didn't have to depend on paintings for money. Because what happens now is that if people only really like a specific type of art, for example, let's take music. If people like mainstream pop music, then a lot of artists feel that they have to make mainstream pop music if they want to have a living. So this pushes out other artists who might have more creative ideas within the fields of rock or jazz. And this forces people to adhere to a very thin line of what's acceptable in society, and that is killing off our creativity. And taking risk is one of the biggest advantages that UBI is going to give us. There don't seem to be any more questions. So, if in case any of you want to, okay, if both of them have the same human idea of making things better, then how is the stock trader's job useless? Okay, I never treated a stock trader's job as useless in like my original presentation. It's technically not a part of the service economy. It's technically no, um, right. So it's not part of the service economy, and it's not similar to any other job that we have. Even a teacher in a way is providing a service. I don't consider that a useless job because you're still providing value to people's lives in the form of education, which they can use to gain money and find a job. So even a teacher is part of a service economy, but they're not useless. By useless jobs, I mean jobs which we created only for the heck of it. For example, receptionists were not a thing until people realized that it would just make their lives a lot easier if there was someone else taking calls instead of them taking calls. So the only thing that a receptionist is really doing, like just a basic receptionist is doing, is taking calls and redirecting them. And in either way, they're only a middle person. They're not creating value for either the person calling or either the person receiving the call. Sure, it might make their task easier, but they still have to take the call. They're not really saving that much of a time. So receptionists in that sense aren't creating any value at all. On the other hand, a stock trader or a painter, they are creating value which can be bought or sold. So there is a demand and a supply for both of those things. For a receptionist job, sure, there is a demand and there is a supply, but it can't be quantified into anything physical because it just didn't exist back many years ago. And this is a job that can easily be automated away. Stock traders make money with the help of a lot of algorithms, but having an AI having an AI do this really defeats the purpose of making money. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of restrictions in the future on machines actually doing this stuff for us, for the same reason that insider trading is banned today.
Thank you for a really interesting talk, Udit. And also thank you to everyone who participated in the Q&A and attended the Exun Talk session. That's it for today.
Thank you so much.